This is my 100th take. I'm just gonna mess up. My name is Kyle Kelly, and this semester I had the opportunity to work with Dr. Barbara Karwasinski on a research project on sociology. Language and reality shape each other in a dance we call the evolution of the individual and collective consciousness. As we discover more about reality, we must expand our language to define it. As our language expands, we find new ways to define reality. Generation Z stands at a pivotal point in our cognitive evolution. They were born between 1995 and 2012. Generation Z grew up with technology at their fingertips. They're generating fear in the generations that came before them. People are worried about short attention spans and words missing letters. People fear that technology has resulted in a preference for images and symbols over words. With the aid of powerful search algorithms, a short attention span, and years of observation, I hope to find a way out of the cultural lag we're experiencing. Our species is used to cultural changes happening over millennia. Technology is now causing large cultural changes in centuries and decades. Our tolerance for change needs to change. Research has shown that in the past few decades, attention duration and intensity has gone down drastically. I think the important thing to be concerned with is why intensity has gone down. Specifically, why aren't students engaged? Philosophers throughout the centuries have talked about standing on the shoulders of giants. We're so high now that it's frightening to stand upon these shoulders, and we're clinging to their backs, merely looking over. Therefore, we have to allow language to evolve. Allowing language to condense into complex visual images may actually be language evolving to be more like the brain's actual language. We also need to let technology be the extension of our mind it's meant to be. There's so much knowledge, we need to store it on external hard drives to be retrieved when a problem we face prompts it. We need to allow calculators to remember algebra and word processors to keep our spelling in check. In return, we may have a larger imaginative canvas to work with. The advent of farming afforded us more time to imagine the present we now have. It's time to allow modern technology to free our minds to imagine the future. Interactive virtual reality classrooms and augmented reality for transitioning into the real world could help students learn faster than ever. The students would immediately apply the condensed conceptual knowledge being shown to them. Researchers have found that immersive English learning role-playing games strengthened connectivity in areas associated with language, production, and comprehension. When more than one sense is used while learning, the chances of retaining that information increases. Computer-aided learning can activate verbal and nonverbal systems simultaneously. The ability to touch and smell in virtual reality are already being developed. Gaming can also increase motivation by allowing friends to take on tasks together. I started this paper before the pandemic, imagining how cool it would be to have VR goggles in the classroom, fantasizing about a calculus class where graphs were superimposed onto the reality they represent, maybe in some sort of manufacturing facility, changing the shape of some part you're making. Every move you make with the object lights up and changes the equations you're working with in real time. I want to play with the lecture, especially now since we aren't meeting in person for the time being. Other studies are taking a look at how we process meaning when it's conveyed with images rather than words. One particular study looks at how we process one particular study looked at emoji use, specifically the difference in brain activity when using the wink emoji to convey irony rather than words. According to this research, brain activity caused by emojis is almost identical to that seen in word-induced irony. The emoji condenses the amount of information needed to convey an idea. There are worries that a certain amount of ambiguity can arise out of the use of images, but this is true for the use of words as well. All forms of communication rely on the listener and speaker having some sort of common ground. Regardless of the possibility of ambiguity, complex images have the ability to condense language while still conveying the full idea. When surveyed, students tend to say that they learn better by doing rather than lecture. Videos also tend to help introduce them to real-world situations. I think this is a good indicator that the introduction of virtual reality would be beneficial. Being able to immediately and safely work with the subject matter would be extremely helpful. According to some, interactivity is becoming the preferred method in achieving student success. VR or even a video game on a regular TV has the ability to completely immerse us in a topic. More of my video game fantasies include learning how to maintain and operate an ion accelerator before I even take my first physics course, and pushing all the buttons on virtual versions of the equipment mentioned while my chemistry teacher lectures. Many studies have been conducted on the thought-language relationship. Some studies look at the effect of having words for colors. It was found that languages that did not lexically code for certain colors were better at judging the distance between two hues. Later, the same team reconfirmed these findings by removing the relevance of color names with a group of people that do have words for the colors being used. Once again, they judged reality better without lexically coding for it. The language one is using in a given moment affects the reality they see. Another experiment had shown that when participants did not apply labels, they were better at overcoming distortions of reality. Experiments have shown that verbally describing an image right after seeing it makes a person less accurate at recognizing it in the future. None of this is to say that words always distort reality. When shown a nonsense shape, labels help recall that shape. It seems that language can help define reality accurately, just as much as it can distort our view of reality. Modern technology and our desire to understand language disorders has shed a lot of light on how our language systems operate. Work in the field of phraseology has shown that language processing requires much more than Broca's and Wernicke's area, with some areas having little to do with language at all. The authors of one particular article put it beautifully in saying that language does not just depend on two brain areas and one fiber tract, but instead are the result of a large network made up of constellations of neurons and neural events that contribute as needed to the task at hand. Together, these constellations make up our picture of reality. These structures and the electrochemical activity within them are the brain's real language. It is the imprint that reality leaves on our minds via the senses. Matter and energy are all there is. Therefore, every thought and idea in our minds is a combination of shapes and motion, a complex moving picture. To understand something, one has to know more than the words. Thousands of years before our humans developed the first written language, we drew shapes and represented motion on the walls of caves. Generation Z's inclination towards using complex images to communicate seems to be language evolving to be more like the brain's actual language. When learning, things like virtual reality have the ability to give us the entire picture at once. While the teacher lectures, we could be playing with the reality his or her words represent. Instead of being given words and having to link them to the reality, the rest of the constellation. We would be placed in the reality and then guided through it with words. If the virtual world itself did not generate intensity of attention, then the games or tasks could be constructed to facilitate it. I've grown up with ADHD and have been unmedicated since the 10th grade. I am no stranger to having a short attention span. I can focus with intensity but lack duration. I lack duration in a consecutive sense, but if I've paid attention intensely, I'll keep visiting and adding to those ideas regularly. Each time my brain parts from a thought, it has the possibility to come back to it from another angle, all the while increasing the connections within and size of the structures that constitute my image of reality. Ideas and concepts are accessible without having words for them. A good example is when I'm working with someone and forget the name of an object. I may not know the name, but I know what it looks like, what it feels like, sounds like, the different things it can do and or help me do. Words are supplemental to our mind's true language. When we sleep, this language comes alive. It creates complex images complete with all the stimuli we are capable of receiving during our waking hours. If dreams themselves are not the language of the brain, then they are a direct translation of that language. Complex images are our first language. I'm part of Generation Y, but identify with the technological aspects of Generation Z. I may not have started with a pocket-sized computer, but a computer nonetheless. I enjoy playing video games, and they are one of the things that can hold my attention with intensity. I have no doubt that I'd enjoy a virtual chemistry or physics laboratory. We have the capability now to make this magic school bus a reality. Let's do it. Video games already bring people from around the world together. Education also brings people closer. It seems the more educated and larger a person's view of reality is, the more accepting they are of human diversity. If we can find more efficient ways to educate, I think our species as a whole would have a better chance of survival.